Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something pretty amazing. How the gods of Greek mythology, these characters from epic stories, got the faces and bodies we all recognize. We're going to see how timeless tales were literally chiseled into reality.
Seriously, think about it for a sec. What pops into your head? I'm guessing it's a powerful, perfectly sculpted dude, right? Maybe a big flowing beard, a thunderbolt ready to go. That image is so strong, so baked into our culture. But where did it actually come from?
And here's the key. While the myths gave the gods their drama, their powers, and all their family squabbles, it was the artists who gave them a body. The incredible idealized human shapes we think of when we hear Zeus or Aphrodite weren't just born from words. They were painstakingly carved and painted into existence. So, how did this happen? How did we go from an idea to a statue? Well, to get it, we've got to travel way back to the beginnings of Greek art and watch how artists went from making simple symbols to crafting these breathtakingly real statues. You see, ancient Greek art wasn't just one thing. It grew and changed over hundreds of years. It kicked off in the geometric period with, geometric shapes. Then came the archaic, the famous classical, and finally the Hellenistic period. Each step on this timeline is a huge leap forward, getting closer and closer to the realism that basically defined all of Western art. And this is where you can really see the magic happen. Just look at the difference between the archaic and classical periods. The early archaic statues, they're called kouroi. See how stiff and formal they look? They were super influenced by Egyptian art. They're not meant to be realistic people. They're symbols. But then, bam, the classical period hits. Artists break free. All of a sudden, they're making figures that look like they could breathe. Figures with natural poses, graceful movement, a totally idealized human body. And this was way more than just a new style. It was a complete revolution in how they thought about art. Artists weren't just following a formula anymore. For the very first time, they were really looking, observing muscles, how people stand, how they move, and they were trying to capture actual life in stone and bronze. Okay, so let's zoom in on that classical period, because this new obsession with realism gave birth to something called the classical ideal, a standard of perfection and beauty that would, and I'm not kidding, echo for thousands of years. In this era, Greek artists got completely obsessed with creating the perfect human form. It wasn't just about making it look real, it was about making it look ideal. And they built this whole idea on three main pillars: perfect proportion, graceful poise, and just overall perfection. And of course, they applied this ideal to the gods, but on a totally epic scale. Take the sculptor Phidias. He created this mind-blowing statue of Zeus at Olympia. It was made of gold and ivory over a wooden frame, and it was over 40 feet tall. It was so incredible, it became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Can you imagine walking into that temple? This art didn't just depict the gods, it made them feel real and powerful, and right there in the room with you. This drive for the ideal also led to some pretty groundbreaking stuff. So nude male statues were common, but then the artist Praxiteles comes along and just shatters all the rules with his Aphrodite of Knidos. It was the very first time a major artist sculpted a life-sized, completely nude woman. It made the goddess of love and beauty seem human and vulnerable in a way no one had ever dared before. It was a total game changer. And believe it or not, this whole quest for perfection was practically a science. Artists like Polykleitos actually wrote rule books called the Kanon, which laid out the mathematical formulas for the perfect body. One of the big rules was the 1:7 ratio, the idea that the body should be 7 heads tall. It was all about using math to get that divine, harmonious look. Now, the story totally doesn't stop when ancient Greece ends. Nope, this Greek ideal was so powerful that it became the blueprint for art for centuries. First, the Romans copied it, and then, much later, it had this spectacular comeback during the Renaissance. Okay, let's fast forward about 1,500 years. We're in the Renaissance, and artists are rediscovering all this incredible art and literature from the ancient world. They were completely captivated. When a master like Raphael painted his Triumph of Galatea, he wasn't just telling a story from a myth. He was actively trying to channel the beauty and the energy of classical art. And get this quote from the art historian Vasari. He said Raphael wasn't trying to paint a real person. His goal was to represent ideal beauty. Sound familiar? It's the exact same thing the ancient Greek sculptors were trying to do. It's like the conversation just picked right back up after a 1,000-year break. A bit later, you get the Baroque artists like Peter Paul Rubens. And what they did was take that classical ideal and just pump it full of new energy. His Leda and the Swan definitely uses the forms from Greek myth, but he loads it with so much more drama, emotion, and sensuality. He's pushing the whole thing even further. And that's the point, really. These later artists weren't just making copies. They were having a conversation with the ancients. They were digging into the psychology of these myths, exploring all the drama and emotion, and proving just how timeless and powerful those original Greek visions of the gods really were. So, after this massive journey through more than 2,000 years of art, what's the big takeaway? What does this all mean for us today? It's pretty simple, actually. The way we picture these gods is an artistic inheritance. That image of Zeus we started with, it's the final product of this long, long conversation between stories and stone, myth and material. The Greeks invented a visual language for power, beauty, and divinity, and artists have been speaking it ever since. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to chew on. The ancient Greeks used their art to give a perfect human body to their gods, but that basic desire to capture our highest ideals in some kind of visual form, that never went away. It just changed. So the question is, what are our ideals today, and what does our art look like when it tries to bring them to life?